Hey guys, tonight we were heading somewhere warmer than your laptop charger and more chaotic than your family group chat. The Holy Land in the late 12th century. Yes, tonight we were diving into the life of King Baldwin IV, the Leper King of Jerusalem, a teenager with a crown, a chronic illness, and somehow enough military swagger to make Saladin go, "Wait, him?" Before we get cozy. Go ahead and like the video and subscribe, but only if you actually enjoy this kind of historical chaos, narrated in a soothing whisper. Seriously, no pressure. Drop a comment telling me where you're listening from and what ridiculous hour it is. It's always 1:43 AM somewhere, and someone is always doom-scrolling in bed. All right, dim the lights, turn on that fan, tuck your feet under a blanket so any wandering medieval rats, imaginary ones, don't worry, don't mistake you for a midnight snack. Now let's warm up your brain with some essential questions. Have you ever wondered what it's like to rule a kingdom while your body is busy staging a health-related rebellion? Did medieval regents behave like responsible adults, or more like co-workers fighting over who controls the office thermostat? How does a 16-year-old win a battle against Saladin when modern 16-year-olds can barely win against their morning alarm? What did medical treatment for leprosy look like? Spoiler. It has basically thoughts and prayers, but with herbs. Did medieval crowns itch? Did royal cloaks smell weird? Could you run a kingdom while your fingers were literally refusing to cooperate? And the biggest one, could you survive being a medieval king without Wi-Fi, antibiotics, or the ability to call HR on your nobles? Well, congratulations. You've just woken up in the year 1174 and you're now 14-year-old King Baldwin IV of Jerusalem. You haven't even grown a full beard yet, but congratulations. The entire kingdom is already your problem. Good luck. You wake up to someone placing a heavy metal crown on your still developing skull, which you quickly discover feels like wearing a hot saucepan filled with responsibility. The weight is uneven, the fit is questionable, and you are fairly certain you now understand why medieval monarchs had that permanent, "I haven't slept since the Second Crusade" facial expression. You blink into the golden haze of incense smoke and ceremonial torches, trying to look majestic while your brain is busy screaming, "I am 14." Let's talk about your surroundings. You're standing in the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, which is beautiful, sacred, and most importantly humid in a way you didn't know a stone building could be. The crowd is an uncomfortable blend of pilgrims, nobles, clergy, and people who came simply to witness the spectacle of a boy king. Everyone leans forward as the crown wobbles slightly to the left, and one priest coughs in a way that suggests he is spiritually concerned, but also physically exhausted. The air buzzes with whispered prayers and whispered gossip, occasionally indistinguishable from each other. Your robes, by the way, are heavy. Not just wintercoat heavy, but several uncooperative sheep stitched together and dipped in gold embroidery heavy. They drag behind you like a medieval weighted blanket you didn't ask for. And even worse, you can scratch your nose because doing so during your coronation would apparently be a political crisis. So you just stand there, itching silently while everyone stares. Now, let's talk about the performance. Coronations in the Kingdom of Jerusalem were meant to radiate heavenly legitimacy. You're expected to stand like an adult, think like a ruler, and look like you've been preparing for this moment since birth. Meanwhile, your inner monologue is mostly "Don T trip, Don T sneeze, Don T throw up." A bishop steps forward and anoints you with holy oil. It is warm, slightly sticky, a little runny, and it slides down your temple in a way that makes you desperately wish someone had handed you a towel. The nobles kneel, one after another, swearing loyalty. You're not entirely sure they mean it. Half of them are calculating political opportunity. The other half are hoping you'll turn into a strong king, but are quietly betting against it. You're 14. You can even grow facial hair confidently. But today, you wear the mantle of your father, Amalric IV, who, frankly, left behind a kingdom that could use several miracle fixes, none of which you have the power to perform. Then comes the applause. The crowd erupts in cheers that echo through the stone halls. You smile, trying to look regal, but the crown shifts on your head again, making you wince slightly. It's fine. Everyone politely pretends not to notice. Your teenage spine, however, does notice. It screams, "Why are we doing this? Can we leave? Can we not be king for like 5 minutes?" And now, time for a modern comparison. Imagine you're at your school graduation, but instead of receiving a diploma, someone hands you the nuclear launch codes, a failing economy, and a list of enemies who are all much older, smarter, and significantly less amused by your existence. Also, your outfit weighs as much as a small refrigerator. That S, your coronation. The ceremony concludes with a long procession, very long. You walk slowly through the streets of Jerusalem as people wave palm branches and shout blessings. The sun beats down relentlessly, and at one point you're convinced you might actually melt into the pavement. Kids your age run alongside, staring at you in awe while you're busy trying not to faint. By the time you reach the palace, you finally get to remove the crown. You lift it off your head, feeling a sudden sense of lightness immediately followed by the crushing realization that placing it back on is now your lifelong responsibility. The throne room smells faintly of old wood and fresh anxiety. And that's the awkward coronation of a 14-year-old king. A moment both glorious and deeply uncomfortable, like being promoted from intern to CEO while still wearing braces. Before you can even learn how to project king voice, 2 grown men begin bickering over your kingdom like divorced parents, deciding who gets the good couch. And not just any grown men, these are nobles with egos large enough to require their own storage barns. You're sitting there in your oversized throne, feet barely touching the floor, watching the medieval equivalent of a reality show argument unfold in real time. Let S set the scene. You're newly crowned, and according to tradition, because you're basically still emotionally, physically, and hormonally under construction, someone has to run the kingdom on your behalf. Enter Miles of Plancy and Raymond III of Tripoli, 2 men who fundamentally disagree on who should actually be in charge of everything that matters. Their arguments echo through the palace halls with all the subtlety of a pair of goats headbutting over a tin can. Miles of Plancy, first on the stage, is ambitious in the way that makes everyone else quietly hide their valuables. He is bold, assertive, and looks at the kingdom as if it is already half monogrammed with his initials. He positions himself close to you, speaking quickly about policy, alliances, and taxes you definitely don't understand yet. You wonder if kings are supposed to know what financial solvency means at 14. Probably not. Across the political battlefield stands Raymond of Tripoli, older, steadier, and exuding the kind of calm confidence that comes from already having lived through at least 3 crises before breakfast. Raymond is a cousin of your family and believes that this biological proximity grants him the right to oversee things. He speaks softly but dangerously, like someone who could end a debate with one eyebrow raise. Now, because you are the king, both men address you directly, but it becomes very obvious, very quickly, that they are actually talking at each other, not to you. Miles argues for strong action, bold strategy, and keeping the kingdom aggressive against Saladin. Raymond counters with diplomacy, patience, and the suggestion that Miles should maybe sit down and breathe before making a decision that accidentally bankrupts the treasury. Meanwhile, you're sitting between them like a medieval child caught between 2 feuding uncles during a holiday dinner, wondering if it would be rude to ask for snacks while they shout about military logistics. Let S talk sensory details. The palace hall is warm, lit by afternoon sunlight pouring through narrow windows. Dust floats in the light, drifting lazily like it is trying to escape the drama. You can smell parchment, ink, sweat, and the faint burning of incense, likely a priestess attempt to purify the room after yet another political meltdown. The arguments rise and fall like waves, punctuated by the occasional scribe sighing loudly in despair. Now bring in our modern comparison. Imagine you were a newly promoted manager at your first ever job. You don't know where the supply closet is. You don't know how to log into the important software. You're still learning people names. And two senior employees burst into your office yelling about whose turn it is to handle the big important project. You consider telling them you just want 5 minutes to eat your sandwich, but instead you say, interesting, in the most authoritative voice you can muster. That is your life now, and you are not wrong to feel awkward. The nobles watch this drama unfold like spectators at a joust. They mutter, they nudge each other, they place unofficial bets. Some support Miles, others prefer Raymond. A few quietly wish for a third option entirely, like someone who doesn't treat governing like a competitive sport. Eventually the tension reaches its peak. Miles of Plancy attempts to assert control one too many times, and the nobles, fed up with his boldness, arrange politely and subtly for his abrupt removal from political relevance. By removal, we mean assassination. Medieval politics were very clear on problem solving. If someone is too ambitious, simply delete them. Miles falls out of the picture, and Raymond III steps in as your regent. His leadership is calmer, more stable, and significantly less likely to get you collectively stabbed. You breathe easier, though you still don't fully understand half the meetings he drags you to. Still, Raymond's regency marks a new chapter, quieter, steadier, but with its own brand of political tension simmering under the surface. And you, the teenage king, continue to sit on the throne, nodding wisely, pretending you understand everything, while quietly wishing both men would just let you go outside and practice archery like a normal 14-year-old. One day during lessons, your tutor gently asks why you didn't react when he accidentally jabbed your arm with a quill. It's a small moment, an almost forgettable one, but it is the spark that sets off everything that follows. You blink at him, confused, because you honestly thought he hadn't touched you at all. His eyes narrow in the way adults' eyes narrow when they realize something is about to become a problem. Let is set the classroom scene. You're in a modest study chamber tucked into the palace, with sunlight streaming through narrow windows and illuminating shelves of manuscripts you have been pretending to read. The air smells of parchment, ink, and the faint hint of rosemary that your tutor uses to mask whatever medieval odour tends to linger in stone rooms. You're halfway through a lesson on theology or Latin declensions, something absolutely thrilling, when your tutor reaches over you with a quill, misjudges his own elbow space, and jabs you right in the upper arm. You don't flinch, not even a blink. The man nearly drops his parchment. Now, this is medieval Jerusalem, so people notice things like you didn't react to a stab with a little more intensity than your average workplace safety officer. Your tutor slowly lowers the quill and asks, "My lord, did you feel that?" You shrug. Shrugging seems safe. Neutral, normal. Except it is not normal, and your tutor knows it. He's seen you flinch at spilled hot wax, stubbed toes, and a particularly enthusiastic bee. So this is strange. The lesson stops immediately because in medieval royal life, any anomaly in a king's body is basically a flashing red alarm labelled future political crisis. You are ushered to a bench. Your tutor calls for attendance. They arrive looking panicked, as if you've spontaneously grown a second head. You assure them you are fine. They do not believe you. Let's take a sensory tour here. You sit still while people prod your arm experimentally, the way someone checks bread dough to see if it has risen. They press, poke, pinch. You feel some of it, but not all of it. And even what you do feel is oddly muted, like someone turned down your body's volume knob. You feel embarrassed. You feel confused. But you don't feel the quill. Soon the physicians arrive. Medieval physicians, mind you, which means men with impressive beards, impressive robes, and medical toolkits that amount to oils, prayers, and let us see what happens. They murmur to each other in low tones while examining you in ways that are neither comfortable nor reassuring. One doctor scratches your arm with a stylus. Another pricks your hand with a thin needle. Another splashes cold water on your wrist. You sit there like a stone statue, noticing only half of what is supposed to be happening. Eventually they step aside and whisper urgently. Now for a modern comparison, imagine going to the school nurse with a mild stomachache and suddenly being referred to 9 specialists who all speak in ominous metaphors. That's what this feels like. A simple moment that snowballs into a diagnostics panel worthy of a medieval cliffhanger. The physicians return, their faces carefully arranged in what can only be described as, "We need to tell you something, but we'd prefer not to." They ask you if you've experienced numbness elsewhere. Tingling, weakness. Have you noticed patches of skin behaving oddly? You start to panic, not loudly, because kings don't panic loudly but quietly, in that tight-chested way where your heartbeat feels like it's trying to escape your ribs. They request privacy. Your tutor bows his head. A physician kneels before you and, in solemn tones, explains that your symptoms resemble those of leprosy. The room goes still, cold. Even though the sun still shines, it suddenly feels like the shadows stretch a little longer toward your throne. You've heard the word before everyone has. It is whispered in the streets, feared in villages, spoken in sermons with a mix of dread and divine warning. Leprosy is not just an illness, it is a social sentence, a stigma, a slow, creeping threat that takes your body piece by piece. You want to argue. Tell them it is a mistake. Say you feel fine, but the numbness in your arm is undeniable, and suddenly your palace feels too big, too quiet, too heavy. To their credit, the physicians don't panic the way common folk do. You're the king after all. They promise discretion. They promise to watch your symptoms. They promise treatments, though you quickly realize that medieval treatments mostly consist of herbs, hope, and vibes. And just like that, your life changes. The diagnosis you didn't ask for arrives quietly, politely, like an uninvited guest who plans to stay forever. A panel of physicians gathers, all of them stroking beards longer than your life expectancy. Their beards alone could each qualify for minor political office. They stand in a semicircle around you, humming thoughtfully, as if your body's a riddle and they are a group of scholars trying to decipher it, without any of the necessary clues. You sit as still as possible while they poke, prod, and exchange glances that suggest they're about to say something you want to like. Let us set the sensory stage. You're in a dim chamber, deep within the palace, surrounded by tapestries and the faint smell of dried herbs. A brazier burns in the corner, filling the air with a smoky haze and also helping mask whatever scent arises from the physician's personal hygiene routines, which seem to predate soap. Their medical kits are laid out dramatically on a table. Little jars of dubious ointments, sharp tools that look more like woodworking equipment, and bundles of herbs that might cure you or summon woodland spirits. Hard to say. As they mutter, you catch fragments of conversation, loss of sensation, discoloration, possible progression, and your personal favourite, with the grace of God. That last one is medieval medical code, for we have absolutely no idea how to fix this. They begin their tests. One physician brushes your arm with a feather, another presses a heated coin to your wrist, a third pokes your leg with something sharp that you pray was cleaned beforehand. You respond inconsistently, flinching at some things, feeling nothing at others. The physicians hum in unison, like an out-of-tune choir. Finally, the eldest physician, his beard practically trailing on the floor, steps forward with the solemnity of a man about to deliver both bad news and a lecture. He explains that the symptoms strongly suggest leprosy. The word hangs in the air like a stone dropped into water, heavy, unavoidable, and echoing with consequences. Let's pause here. Medieval leprosy was not well understood. Today we know it is caused by a slow-growing bacterium. But your physicians, they believe it as a divine affliction, a spiritual test, or possibly the result of breathing air that was in a particularly bad mood. Treatments are a fun mix of prayers, balms, restrictive diets, and please don't give up hope, my lord. You listen as the physicians outline your new reality. They speak gently, but the message is clear. This illness progresses slowly. It disfigures, it disables, and it will require constant care. They assure you it won't dim your mind but your body. Your body is already starting to betray you. Your attendants shift awkwardly in the background, unsure whether to comfort you or pretend they can hear what's happening. Everyone knows leprosy carries enormous social stigma. Many sufferers are forced into isolated communities, cut off from their families. But you are the king. You won't be exiled, but your life will be shaped by this diagnosis in ways no 14-year-old could ever imagine. Now, for a modern comparison. Imagine going to a doctor for a minor numbness in your hand and being told you have a long-term degenerative illness with no cure. And instead of prescribing medication, your doctors pull out a bag of herbs, a Bible, and something that looks suspiciously like a kitchen spoon. That medieval medicine. The physicians begin discussing treatment options. They suggest applying soothing salves made from oils and crushed leaves. They recommend bathing in warm herbal mixtures. One physician enthusiastically mentions purifying the humours, which you suspect involves vomiting, bleeding, or both. They also advise prayer as if you weren't already praying silently for them to leave you alone. Then comes the part that truly unsettles you, the secrecy. They warn that the kingdom cannot know. Not yet. Not openly. The political consequences would be catastrophic. Nobles would panic. Enemies would pounce. Your authority already fragile due to your age would shatter. So your illness becomes a private matter shared only among a select circle. The physicians bow, swear discretion, and depart with weighted silence. You sit alone in the chamber. The brazier glows. Your arm tingles or doesn't tea. You're not sure anymore. You feel small, vulnerable, and profoundly tired in a way no child king should ever feel. This is the beginning of a lifelong battle not against an enemy army, but against your own unravelling body. And in typical medieval fashion, your only available weapons are determination, faith, and whatever ointment the bearded men decide to mix up tomorrow morning. Being king is hard enough, but being king while your own body refuses to cooperate is a next-level challenge. It's the kind of challenge that would make even the most seasoned monarch look toward the heavens and say, seriously. Your days now begin with the awkward realization that the throne is not designed for someone whose limbs feel unpredictable, and end with the quiet understanding that tomorrow will require even more effort than today. Let us set the morning scene. You wake up to attendants hovering around you like anxious bees, ready to help you dress, because buttons, ties, buckles, and straps have become enemies in your personal war against degeneration. They try to be discreet, but you can sense their concern when your fingers don't quite grasp a cloak clasp, or when you fail to feel the pinprick from a poorly placed brooch. You smile politely, pretending everything is normal, while internally noting that nothing feels normal anymore. Your first task of the day is usually council meetings, long, exhausting gatherings with nobles who love the sound of their own voices. The council chamber is filled with sunlight, dust motes, and tension. You sit in your tall back throne, feeling the weight of the kingdom and the increasing heaviness in your limbs. Your hands rest on the armrests, not because it looks regal, but because lifting them takes too much energy. Raymond, your regent, tries to guide the discussions, but every noble in the room insists on looking at you. You, the teenage king, the one trying desperately not to show that you can't feel half your palm. They want to know your opinion on tax adjustments, military preparedness, food shortages, border tensions, and whether someone's cousin-in-law's land dispute is a matter of national urgency. You nod thoughtfully, pretending to consider details you can barely follow, because your joints are throbbing. Here's a modern comparison. Imagine trying to give an important presentation at work while dealing with flu symptoms, a migraine, and the sinking realization that your laptop is about to die. Now remove the laptop the room temperature control, and access to ibuprofen. Replace them with itchy wool robes, political intrigue, and the responsibility of defending an entire kingdom. That's your life now. In private, the real struggle takes shape. Writing documents becomes frustrating. Your handwriting is shaky. Your grip weak. Signing royal decrees feels like arm wrestling fate. Walking through the palace grows harder. Some days you lean on a cane, other days you quietly accept the arm of a trusted knight. You hate that you need help. You hate even more that people have begun to notice. And yet, your mind remains sharp, if anything sharper, because when your body betrays you, you compensate with strategy, with intelligence, with grit. You listen more carefully. You read expressions. You sense tension before anyone speaks. You begin to understand which nobles can be trusted, which ones secretly hope the crown will pass sooner than later, and which ones are simply too afraid to admit they don't know what to do either. By midday, fatigue sets in like an unwelcome guest. Your muscles ache. Your skin feels wrong. You excuse yourself from meetings subtly regally, even retreating to private chambers where attendants help you adjust your bandages. They're gentle, and they try not to show sympathy, but you can feel the heaviness in the air. You're not supposed to be this fragile. You're supposed to be strong, heroic, a king. But here's the part that surprises everyone, including you. Your spirit refuses to quit. Leprosy can weaken your limbs, but it can touch your resolve. So every afternoon you push yourself back out into the palace halls. You make appearances. You listen to petitions. You inspect troops. You sit for hours in council sessions, absorbing every detail, pushing back against that quiet voice that whispers, "Rest." By evening, your body feels like a crumbling fortress, but your determination stands tall. You collapse into bed, exhausted but not defeated. You know each day will get harder, but each day you also learn something new about ruling, about strategy, and about yourself. The kingdom sees your composure. They admire your discipline. They whisper that you are stronger than any king before you, even though strength now looks less like swinging a sword and more like staying upright long enough to sign another decree. It's not the kind of rule you imagined, but it's the one you have, and you meet it with quiet, relentless endurance, piece by piece. Even as those pieces begin to fall away, the kingdom is surrounded by threats. Your nobles are squabbling, and everyone keeps asking your opinion on things you don't understand yet. All you wanted this morning was a quiet breakfast, and maybe 5 minutes where no one asked you about troop movements, diplomatic correspondence, or wheat shortages. Instead, you were dragged into the political equivalent of a medieval group chat meltdown, except you can demute anyone. Let us start with the atmosphere. You sit in the council chamber, a room that always feels too warm and too crowded. The smell of heated stone mixes with the slightly worrying scent of unwashed wool cloaks. Nobles cluster around a long wooden table, talking loudly over each other, each convinced they are the sole voice of reason in a world made entirely of people who annoy them. You try to listen. You really do. But every conversation sounds like a different kind of emergency. One noble demands more troops along the Egyptian frontier because Saladin might be planning something. Another complains that the taxes in Galilee are too low, or too high, or too something. A third insists on discussing the spiciness level of the last diplomatic banquet, which shockingly is not the most pressing issue at the moment. You nod. You frown thoughtfully. You do that thing where you touch your chin like a philosopher, even though your main internal thought is, why is everyone yelling so early in the day? Meanwhile, your weakened hands grip the armrests of your throne a little too tightly, because keeping your posture steady takes more effort than you'll ever admit. Here's the modern comparison. Imagine doing your first day at a brand new job, but the job is ruling a kingdom. The onboarding packet is 300 pages long, and everyone expects you to already know the password to the national security system. Oh, also you're a teenager dealing with a degenerative illness, and your co-workers might start a civil war if someone breathes wrong. The crisis erupts mid-meeting. News arrives breathless. Panicked news that Saladin has made a bold move somewhere along the border. No one's sure exactly where, because medieval communication is basically a relay race of sweaty messengers, but everyone is sure that something bad is happening. Immediately the nobles start shouting over each other. Raymond wants restraint. Others want attack. Some want negotiations. One knight, who has absolutely not been invited to speak, suggests a preemptive strike so absurd that the entire room pauses to stare at him. You watch the chaos unfold like someone witnessing a fire they technically own, but are legally forbidden to touch. And here is the thing, everyone keeps turning to you for a final decision. You, the teenager whose biggest recent victory was managing to hold a quill without dropping it. They look at you expectantly, waiting for wisdom to pour out of you like holy water. Inside, you are screaming, "I'm new here." Outside, you give a slow, controlled nod. Because that's what? Kings do they pretend to know what they're doing until they figure out enough to avoid disaster. Raymond gently intervenes, guiding the meeting back towards sanity, but the tension lingers. Some nobles resent his calm influence. Others resent your illness. Others resent the fact that they weren't a born king instead. Politics in medieval Jerusalem is basically a labyrinth made of egos, grudges, and questionable facial hair. As the arguments continue, you feel a familiar numbness creeping into your fingers. You hide your hand beneath the table, flexing it slightly, praying no one notices. You may not fully grasp the military situation, but you do understand the stakes. Any sign of weakness, physical or political, will send the nobles into a frenzy. Eventually, after hours of debate, a decision is made to reinforce border defences without committing to a full campaign. It is a compromise that pleases no one, but enrages fewer people than the alternatives. That is good enough for now. By the time the council disperses, your head throbs, your arm aches or doesn't he, which is worse, and your spirit is exhausted. You slump slightly in your throne once the room empties, feeling both relieved and overwhelmed. This is your first political crisis, and it won to be your last. You're learning quickly that ruling isn't about shouting the loudest or knowing every answer. It's about surviving the endless tide of decisions, managing the egos swirling around you, and doing it all while your body quietly fights its own battle. You take a deep breath. Tomorrow, there will be more crises, more shouting, more decisions, but for today you managed. And in this kingdom that counts as a victory, somewhere far away, the legendary general Saladin hears about a child king with leprosy. He's sitting in a dim pavilion filled with maps, tacticians, and the distant smell of campfire smoke when the news arrives. A teenage monarch, sick, fragile, surrounded by bickering nobles. Saladin raises an eyebrow, one of those slow, dignified eyebrow lifts that only seasoned commanders can perform. You can almost hear his internal monologue. Really? That's who they put on the throne? This should be easy. You, however, are very much not feeling easy. Let's set the ambience of your world as this rumour spreads. You're in the palace, attempting to drink watered wine from a goblet that suddenly feels too heavy, while attendants discuss troop placements and border tensions as if they were talking about the weather. Your hands tremble slightly, not enough for anyone to comment, but enough that you notice. You feel your illness lurking under your skin like a quiet shadow, and you hate how observant the nobles have become. When news arrives that Saladin is taking a keen interest in you, the council chamber fills with the kind of tension usually reserved for royal tax audits. Saladin isn't just a name. He's the looming storm cloud on every horizon. His reputation is vast, strategic, brilliant, disciplined. The kind of man who can turn a small misunderstanding into a geopolitical disaster before lunchtime. You imagine what he must be picturing. A boy sitting on a throne too large for him, wrapped in heavy robes like a child playing dress-up, unable to grip his sword properly. You imagine him laughing into his beard, confident that this Leper King will be more symbolic than threatening. But here's the twist. You know more about Saladin than he knows about you. You've studied his campaigns, his tactics, his leadership style. You admire him, even, slightly, quietly, in a not suitable for public consumption kind of way. Because while he is your enemy, he is also the kind of enemy you measure yourself against. The tension grows heavier with each report. One scout describes Saladin's army movements with shaky hands. Another explains the Sultan has consolidated power in Egypt and Syria. Another whispers that he's gathering forces large enough to make the bravest knight's stomach drop. And then someone addresses the room with the question everyone has been thinking. What does the boy king plan to do? You feel a dozen pairs of eyes land on you, judging, measuring, wondering whether you'll crumble or rise. Here's the modern comparison. It is like being a teenager who just got their learner's permit, only to find out they have to race Lewis Hamilton tomorrow, on a track made of gravel, in a car held together with rope and optimism. The first time you meet Saladin is not face-to-face but mind-to-mind, across dusty battlefields you haven't yet seen. It is a clash of expectations. He sees a fragile teen. You see a challenge that might define your entire reign. Your military advisors begin speaking in rapid-fire suggestions. Some want to negotiate. Others want to retreat. A brave, possibly reckless few want to attack immediately because maybe the Sultan won't expect it. You listen to them, weighing every word, your expression calm even as your stomach twists itself into elaborate knots. Then comes a moment, a strange, clear moment, where you realize something profound. Saladin underestimates you. This isn't arrogance. It is simply math, history, optics. You're a sick teenager ruling a fragile kingdom in a volatile region. If he doesn't take you seriously, that can be your advantage. You straighten your back. Your voice, when you speak, is steady, calm, unexpectedly firm. You tell your commanders that Saladin will not be allowed to walk over Jerusalem simply because he expects it to be easy. For the first time, some nobles blink in surprise. A flicker of respect, a spark of something like hope. Meanwhile, miles away, Saladin sharpens his plans under the assumption that you'll crack under pressure, that your body will fail you before the battlefield even starts. He has no idea he's preparing for a teenager who refuses to give up, not yet, not ever. And so the stage is set. Two leaders, one legendary, one underestimated, begin circling each other across the sands of the Levant. Your illness whispers doubt, but your resolve stands taller than your weakened bones. This is the beginning of one of the most unexpected rivalries in medieval history. At 16, while most kids today struggle with algebra, you're trying to rally an army against the most feared commander in the region. You grip the arm of your chair, your joints stiff and your fingers numb, and you think, this is fine. Totally normal teenage behavior. Outside the palace, men are sharpening swords. Inside, nobles are sharpening their arguments, and all of them keep turning toward you as if your adolescent, half-numb body is the glue holding the entire Crusader kingdom together. Let S set the scene. Jerusalem hums with anxious energy. Messengers run through the streets, breathless with reports of Saladin-esque movements. Mothers pull their children indoors. Priests murmur prayers for victory or at least survival. You sit in a council chamber thick with heat, dust, and dread. Raymond, your regent, stands at your side, grim-faced. Knights line the walls, armoured and restless, and every single person is waiting for you to speak. You take a deep breath. It rattles a bit in your chest. You're 16, barely able to make it through a day without your body staging its own dramatic rebellion. But you also know one truth with startling clarity. If you don't do something bold, your kingdom is toast. Your commanders outline the situation. Saladin has launched a bold campaign. His army is huge, experienced, and absolutely not intimidated by the idea of fighting a teenager. Worse, the general consensus among your advisors is that you should stay home, rest, conserve your strength, let someone else lead. You listen, you nod, and then you promptly ignore every bit of that advice. Because here's the thing. You know your illness frightens the nobles more than it frightens you. You know they see you as fragile. You know morale is crumbling like stale bread. And you also know that if you want the kingdom to believe in you, you must go to war with them, not wave from a window like a concerned mom sending her kids off to summer camp. So you announce that you will lead the army yourself. The room goes silent. Not respectful silence. More like, did he just say that? Silence. Raymond stares at you as if he's trying to telepathically talk you out of it. The nobles exchange looks. A few knights cough awkwardly, unsure whether to cheer or faint. But you stand or, well, attempt to stand. It takes a moment. Your legs shake. You grip the table for balance. You feel weakness buzzing under your skin like a swarm of angry bees. But you lift your chin, and your voice is steady when you speak. This kingdom fights together. And I will not ask you to go where I will not follow. Boom. Royal mic drop. Now let us talk sensory detail. Preparing for battle feels like being inside a giant rattling drum. The clang of armour echoes through the courtyard. Horses snort and paw at the ground. The smell of leather, sweat, and anticipation hangs thickly in the air. When your armourers dress you, the metal feels impossibly heavy, like wearing a personal prison made of forged hope. And yet you endure it. Because the real weight is a chain, mail it. It's a responsibility. Your army gathers, knights from across the kingdom, grim-faced Templars, grizzled veterans who've seen too much, and fresh-faced recruits wondering if they made a terrible career choice. You ride out among them on your warhorse, holding your reins stiffly because your fingers don't cooperate. They notice, but they also notice that you showed up. You're there, sick, young, unsteady, but there. That's the pep talk they needed. Here's the modern comparison. Imagine being the captain of a high school basketball team, except the opposing team is the NBA All-Stars, and your coach says, "You're benched," and you say, "No thanks," and limp onto the court anyway. And somehow, instead of laughing, your teammates suddenly believe you might actually pull this off. The night before battle, you gather your commanders, you speak quietly but firmly. This isn't just strategy, it's morale. Your words weave together duty, faith, and a level of teenage courage that borders on reckless brilliance. You remind them that Jerusalem stands behind them, watching, praying, hoping. And even though your limbs burn with fatigue and your skin feels tight and wrong, you refuse to show it. You know the truth. This battle isn't just about defeating Saladin. It's about proving to your kingdom, to your enemies, and even to yourself that you're more than your illness. You are their king, and tomorrow at Montgisard you intend to fight like one. You charge into battle with the intense, chaotic energy of a teen, determined to prove everyone wrong. Not the "I study for my exam, and now I am going to show my teacher I am," not an academic disaster kind of determination. No, this is the "my entire kingdom thinks I might die before lunchtime, so let's ruin the expectations of every adult in a 50-mile radius" kind. You grip the reins of your horse, your fingers half numb and trembling, and you hope no one notices the way your heart is thundering against your ribs. Let S set the moment. The air is dry, sharp with a scent of dust and distant campfires. The sun hangs above you like a giant judgmental eye. Your army looks shockingly small compared to Saladin-esque, like a flea preparing to spar with a camel, and not a particularly athletic flea. Your knights shift nervously in their saddles. Your infantry mutters prayers. Even the Templars, the men who pride themselves on never being scared of anything, including fire, brimstone, and poor decisions, look uneasy. Across the field, Saladin-esque forces stretched like a shimmering wall of steel and banners. His cavalry alone looks like a moving forest of spears. If you had the energy, you'd swallow hard. Instead, you take a deep breath and try to ignore how your armor digs into your shoulders like an angry metal vice. Your commanders gather around you for last-minute instructions. They speak quickly, urgently, trying to balance realism with encouragement. You nod along, attempting to look like a king who has calculated every possible outcome, instead of a teenager who just really does not want to embarrass himself in front of thousands of people. And then the horn sounds. Your horse surges forward with a jolt so forceful that for half a second, you are absolutely convinced you're going to fall straight off the saddle. You grip tightly, leaning forward, letting the energy of the moment sweep through you. Pain flickers along your joints, but adrenaline drowns it out like a crashing wave. Men charge around you screaming, praying, roaring. Dust explodes beneath hooves. The air fills with the ringing of metal, the clatter of shields, the rhythmic thunder of hundreds of riders moving as one chaotic organism. You lift your banner, your arms shaking under the weight, and your men roar in response. They needed this. They needed you. And then miraculously, impossibly, you slam into the enemy with a force that shocks even you. Saladin did not expect a direct charge. He especially did not expect a direct charge led by a sick child king whose limbs barely cooperate on normal days. His vanguard falters. His cavalry hesitates. His soldiers begin to wonder if they are facing a king or a divine fever dream. The battle becomes a whirlwind. You can barely keep track of anything beyond the next heartbeat. Blades clash, horses scream, shields splinter. Heat wraps around you like a suffocating cloak. You lose feeling in one hand, then in part of your arm, but you keep riding. Keep shouting, keep pushing your army forward through sheer stubborn force of will. And here's the wild part. It works. Your unexpected ferocity ignites your troops. They push harder, fight louder, move faster. What began as a desperate gamble transforms into a sweeping, stunning momentum shift. You can see panic ripple across Saladin's lines like a stone dropped in water. They turn, they waver. Then, unbelievably, they begin to retreat. Saladin himself barely escapes with his life. His army scatters, stunned, humiliated, and genuinely confused how a teenager held together by bandages and courage just handed them one of the most embarrassing defeats of their careers. As the dust settles, your men erupt into cheers, roar, loud, triumphant. They call your name. They lift you up metaphorically. And thank goodness not physically, because your joints are definitely not up for that. You sit tall in the saddle, exhausted, aching, shaking, but pulsating with something bright and fierce, because today you didn't just fight, you led. You didn't just surprise the world, you surprised yourself. And Montgisard becomes legend not because you were destined for victory, but because you refused to accept anything else. Suddenly, nobles treat you like a real king and not a fragile teen made of glass. Before Montgisard, they spoke to you with the gentle, hesitant tone people use around malfunctioning machinery. Careful, don't jostle him, he might fall apart. After Montgisard, they speak to you like you've personally drop-kicked fate in the teeth. You return to Jerusalem exhausted, bruised, and barely staying upright. But the way people look at you, that alone keeps you standing taller than your weakened legs should allow. Let S set the scene. You enter the city through gates packed with cheering crowds. People climb walls, roofs, anything climbable. Children wave palm branches. Old men shout blessings, and suddenly every street in Jerusalem smells overwhelmingly like incense because the priests are burning victory offerings as if they are trying to fumigate the entire kingdom in holiness. Your horse plods forward slowly, mostly because you asked it to, but also because you need it to. Your joints ache, your skin burns, and when you take off your gauntlet, you realize you can feel 3 of your fingers, but the cheering is so loud, so overwhelming it swallows every ounce of pain. For the first time, you feel not just like a king in title, but a king in truth. Inside the palace, the nobles gather around you with new expressions, less doubt, more awe, and the faint terror that comes from realizing the person they underestimated is actually extraordinarily capable. They bow deeper than usual, their voices soften, their eyes shine with a respect that feels almost strange, and you, still covered in dust and sweat, wonder if this is what real authority feels like. Raymond, your regent, gives you a look that's equal parts pride and relief. The man has spent years juggling politics, diplomacy, and fraying nerves. Now he looks at you and sees hope that maybe, just maybe, the kingdom might hold together after all. The knights treat you differently too. Before the battle, they spoke to you slowly, carefully, as if they were explaining war to someone who still confused cavalry maneuvers with dance steps. Now they approach you with reverence. They clap your shoulder, bow deeply, or place hands over hearts. Even the Templars, stoic, stern, famously allergic to joy, allow themselves the occasional nod of approval. Let us talk sensory details. The palace halls are alive with noise, servants rushing to prepare celebratory feasts, knights recounting the battle with wild gestures, nobles whispering strategies and possibilities. The smell of roasting meat floats through the air. Wine flows like someone turned on a medieval faucet. Musicians tune their instruments, and everywhere you look, people can just stop staring at you. You're still a teenager, still sick, still losing sensation in unpredictable ways, but victory has given you a strange new armor, reputation, admiration, belief, and that is almost as protective as a steel breastplate. Now, a modern comparison. Imagine you're the quiet kid in high school who no one thinks much of until one day you absolutely destroy the star athlete in a surprise tournament. Suddenly everyone wants to sit with you at lunch, your DMs explode, and your gym teacher starts bragging about you to other classes. That's you right now, except instead of a tournament it was an actual battle, and instead of popularity, you've gained national political stability. In the following days, scribes begin crafting heroic accounts. Priests credit divine intervention. Bards start writing songs about your bravery, your tactics, your courage. Some details are exaggerated beyond all logic. One poet insists your sword glowed like a holy beacon, which is absolutely incorrect unless the sun was reflecting weirdly off the blade. But the people don't care. They want a hero. You are that hero. Yet in private, the exhaustion hits like a collapsing tower. As the excitement quiets, you limp to your chambers, muscles trembling, nerves buzzing, limbs refusing to cooperate. You sink into your bed feeling both triumphant and terrified, because you now understand something sobering. The kingdom believes in you. They depend on you. They will expect you to keep delivering miracles. And you're just a sick boy trying to hold himself together with willpower and bandages. That is the paradox of Montgisard. It made you a legend. It gave your reign legitimacy. It earned you respect. But it also set a standard you're not sure your body can maintain. Still, as you drift off to sleep that night, surrounded by praise and pain in equal measure, one truth warms your chest. You proved everyone wrong, your enemies, your nobles, even yourself, and legend or not, that feels good. After Montgisard, you're famous, but also increasingly sick. It is like becoming a celebrity and immediately catching the world's worst flu, but the flu never leaves. You defeat Saladin, ride home victorious, inspire songs, receive cheers, and then wake up the next morning feeling like your bones have declared independence from your body. Fame is intoxicating, but your illness is right there, tapping you on the shoulder like, hey, remember me? Let S set the tone. The palace is bursting with celebration banquets, pomp, nobles telling exaggerated stories about how they knew all along that you were destined for greatness. But behind the laughter and wine, your strength is draining like a leaking bucket. Every time someone slaps your back in congratulations, your joints scream. Every handshake feels like you're trying to grip a handful of needles. Servants assume you're exhausted from the battle. You let them believe it. Your mornings begin with painful stiffness that makes standing an Olympic sport. Your legs fight you with a stubbornness that would be impressive if it weren't happening in your legs. You swing them over the bed, take a deep breath, and prepare the way a knight prepares for combat, only your battlefield is trying to put on socks without assistance. The royal physicians check on you constantly. Their diagnoses range from encouraging, perhaps the symptoms will slow, to depressingly vague. We've added more rosemary to the salve, my lord. They adjust your bandages, they press on numb patches of skin, they whisper to each other in clinical tones while you pretend you're not listening, and every day there's a little more numbness, a little more weakness, a little more fear simmering under your royal composure. Meanwhile, the kingdom wants more of you. More appearances, more decisions, more confidence. You step into the council chamber and the whispers fall silent. They look at you like you are the hero who saved them all, and you are, but you are also the hero who can barely feel one side of his face on bad days. Here's the modern comparison. Imagine going viral for the coolest stunt you've ever pulled, only to spend the next 6 months with a sprained spine, a dislocated rib, and an ongoing cold that refuses to leave. People keep coming up to congratulate you, and you are like, thank you. I haven't slept in 3 days and my left arm is staging a rebellion, but thank you. And then there's the emotional whiplash. One moment you're basking in the afterglow of victory, feeling powerful, historic, unstoppable. The next moment you're staring at your trembling hands, wondering how long you have before you can hold a sword at all. You try to hide the shaking. You clasp your hands together. You keep them under the table. You tell your attendants you are fine. But everyone close to you sees the truth. Your regent, Raymond, catches you gripping a chair for balance between meetings. Your knights notice your shortness of breath when climbing stairs. Your sister sees you pause mid-sentence when your fingers lose sensation again. They all pretend not to see it. You pretend not to see them seeing it. And then there's the cruel irony. The more your fame grows, the more your illness grows with it. Songs about Montgisard echo in the streets while you lie in bed, staring at trembling fingertips illuminated by a flickering candle. Knights reenact your heroic charge in the courtyard, while physicians change bandages that hide the creeping damage beneath your skin. Pilgrims come to see the great king while your attendants help you dress because your hands want to obey you. Yet despite everything, despite the pain, the fear, the exhaustion, you don to stop. You attend council meetings, you listen, you decide, you lead. You force your body to obey, even when obedience comes at a cost, because leadership isn't optional. Your kingdom needs you, and you refuse to let them see anything but strength. That's the strange duality of being King Baldwin IV in these years, adored publicly, suffering privately, legendary in victory, fragile in silence. A king who inspires others while desperately trying to stay ahead of a disease that wants to dismantle you piece by piece. Your glory is real, your illness is relentless, and you wake up every morning knowing you must carry both. Saladin comes back with receipts, and you find yourself fleeing for your life through rough terrain. And not the scenic, Instagrammable kind of terrain, oh no. This is the kind of landscape that makes your ankles scream and your horse reconsider its employment. After Montgisard, Saladin clearly sat down, had a cup of tea, stared into the middle distance and decided he was not going to let a sick teenager embarrass him again. Let S set the mood. You've had a fragile stretch of uneasy peace, fragile in the sense that everyone knows it. It's temporary, like taping your broken phone screen and pretending it is fine. Scouts return with worrying reports. Saladin's armies are moving again, and this time they are not probing your defences. They are marching with intent, with force, with the I am not messing around anymore energy of a man who remembers exactly who ruined his last campaign. Council meetings grow tense. Nobles argue. Knights sharpen their weapons. The Templars hover in the background wearing their permanent expression of, "We were ready to die any time. Just say the word." And you're dealing with your usual double load of problems, being the king and being chronically ill. Your hands tremble when you fasten your armor, your legs feel weak, but you mount your horse anyway, because the kingdom needs leadership, and leadership doesn't get sick days. When your army marches toward Marj Ayyun, the air is thick with heat and dust. The sun presses down like a judgment. Your joints throb from the start, but adrenaline pushes you forward at least until the day goes sideways. Your scouts report that Saladin's forces are larger than expected, much larger and closer. And oh, look, now the scouts are running back because the enemy cavalry is already approaching. This is the medieval version of checking your mailbox and discovering not bills but a live bear. Your commanders react quickly. You try to rally the troops, but Saladin's forces move with terrifying speed and precision. His cavalry sweeps in like a wave of steel and motion. You hear the crush of hooves, the roar of men, the clatter of arrows. Your army begins to buckle. Knights shout orders drowned out by chaos. Dust fills your mouth, your eyes, your lungs. You cough and try to stay upright in the saddle as panic swirls. Then comes the moment you dread. Someone shouts your name not as a cheer, but as a warning. You turn, and through the blur of dust and chaos, you see enemy riders breaking through the lines, far too close. Close enough to reach you. Close enough to capture you. Close enough that you understand why some historical accounts describe this as the moment you nearly didn't survive. Your guards react instantly, surrounding you in a frantic knot of bodies, shields, and shouted commands. One grabs your reins, yanking your horse around. You jolt so hard your vision goes white around the edges. Your illness surges through your limbs like lead. You cling to the saddle, your hands barely responding. You can hold yourself steady. You feel every bump, every lurch, every shift as your horse takes off into the chaos. Let us compare. Imagine you're already having a terrible day, exhausted, feverish, running on fumes. Now imagine someone sets off fireworks behind you and tells you to sprint across a construction site. Blindfolded, barefoot. That is what this retreat feels like. Your horse stumbles on rocky ground. Arrows whistle overhead. Knights shout directions. A commander calls out that part of the army is already destroyed. Someone rides next to you and asks if you are still conscious. You might be. You're not totally sure. But somehow, through dust, sweat, blood, and panic, you make it out. You and your remaining knights flee uphill, scrambling over rocky terrain that feels designed specifically to torture your joints. You clutch your horse's mane when your fingers can't hold the reins. Every breath burns, every heartbeat feels like it might be your last, and then, blessedly, the terrain becomes your shield. Saladin's forces don't pursue far into the hills. They slow, they stop, they turn back. You collapse against your horse's neck, trembling from illness, adrenaline, and the crushing humiliation of defeat. Your soldiers' faces say what no one dares voice aloud. The king barely escaped. Your illness almost cost you everything. And Saladin? He has proven that Montgisard was not the end of the story. Marj Ayyun is a hard lesson, that even legends fall, that even kings bleed, and that your war with Saladin is far from over. You attempt to block Saladin with a big, impressive fortress. The logic feels sound if a dangerous person keeps showing up at your door. You build a bigger lock, and Jacob S. Ford is your lock, a strategically placed stone bulwark planted right on the edge of Saladin's sphere of influence. It's meant to scream, no further. Unfortunately, what it ends up screaming is more along the lines of, "Please don't knock me over, I'm very expensive. Let us set the stage." Jacob S. Ford rises above the landscape like a proud but slightly overconfident teenager who skipped leg day, massive walls, towers, and enough manpower to make it look formidable on paper. But you know the truth. You know how rushed the construction was, how your treasury groaned as stones were hauled up hills, how you pushed your court to keep building even as your illness grew worse, because strategy waits for no one, not even kings held together by determination and linen bandages. Inside the palace, your advisors argued endlessly during its construction. Some called the fort essential, others called it reckless. A few whispered the opinion that you were poking the bear, which, historically speaking, has never been a great military tactic. But you persisted, because you understood something everyone else pretended not to see. Saladin was getting stronger every year, and Jerusalem needed defences that weren't made of optimism and wishful thinking. When scouts finally report that Saladin is approaching Jacob S. Ford, the atmosphere in Jerusalem becomes tense, and not the productive tension of let us rally the troops, but the stressful tension of we all know this was a gamble and now it's judgment day. Your illness has gotten worse, you struggle to hold things, to stand for long, to ride without pain, but you push yourself to attend every council session anyway. You speak firmly, you defend your decision, you try to show unwavering strength, even as parts of your body quite literally waver. And then comes the news that every king dreads. Saladin has arrived at the fort and he brought the medieval equivalent of a very large nope with him. Let's talk sensory detail. Imagine being at court when the first messenger arrives. His face is soaked with sweat, his cloak dusty, his breath ragged. He barely finishes bowing before the words tumble out. "My lord the Sultan has surrounded the fort." Silence drops over the hall like a stone. Raymond looks grim. Other nobles whisper prayers under their breath. You swallow hard because you know what that means. Saladin doesn't waste time. His forces cut off escape routes. Siege engines roll forward wooden monsters designed to batter, crush, and humiliate. Arrows blot the sky. Jacob S. Ford, once a proud symbol of strength, now looks like a child trying to hold back a tide with a sandcastle. Here's the modern comparison. Imagine investing all your savings into a state-of-the-art security system, only to discover your opponent has shown up with a wrecking ball, a locksmith, and 3 friends who watch tutorials on YouTube. That's what this siege feels like. In the following days, new messengers arrive, each with worse news. The walls are cracking, supplies are low, morale is lower. Men are fighting bravely, but bravery is no match for mathematics, and Saladin has more men, more supplies, more time. You pace your chamber, gripping furniture when your legs grow weak, feeling equal parts fury and helplessness. And then the final blow. The fort has fallen. You hear it in the worst way whispered to you while you're attempting to write a decree with hands that barely cooperate. My lord Jacob S. Ford is lost. The details come in pieces. Surviving soldiers limp back with horror in their eyes. Saladin's men overwhelmed the defenders. The fort collapsed into chaos. Many died. Others were captured. And Saladin ordered the fort destroyed, every stone, every tower, every trace of your effort reduced to rubble and ash. The nobles glance at you cautiously, afraid of your reaction. But you don't shout. You don't break. You sit quietly, absorbing the weight of it. The cost, the failure, the reality that even with strategy, determination, and courage, your kingdom will always be fighting uphill. Jacob S. Ford teaches you a hard truth. You can plan brilliantly, fight fiercely, lead fearlessly, but sometimes the world simply hits harder. Sometimes strength isn't enough, but you also learn something else, something Saladin didn't intend. Losing doesn't end your story. It sharpens you, hardens your resolve, pushes you forward, because kings rise and kings fall, but resilient kings rise again. Your mornings now involve bandage changes, awkward servant help, and a growing list of tasks you physically can do. It's not exactly the glamorous royal routine you dreamed about as a kid. There's no elegant stretching by the window, no serene morning stroll through a garden full of dew-kissed roses. Instead, your day begins with the soft, apologetic voices of attendants who gently peel away linen wrappings that cling to your skin like damp cling film with about the same level of comfort. Let S set the mood. The morning air in your chamber is cool and still. The only sounds, the scrape of wooden chairs and the gentle clinking of ceramic jars filled with ointments that smell like a mixture of herbs and faint despair. Your attendants work with delicate care. They've learned how to remove bandages without tugging too hard, how to wash your skin without causing pain, how to adjust their expressions so that concern never turns into pity. You're grateful. You're also mortified. It is one thing to be king. It is another to be a king who needs help putting on a shirt. The process takes time you used to spend training, riding, or simply pretending to understand the content of council reports. Now your body is made getting ready into a side quest. Your fingers don't bend properly. Your legs feel stiff and unreliable. Some mornings sensation is patchy right arm alert. Left arm drifting somewhere in the realm of barely present. You try to hide it. Dignity matters. But dignity is slippery when your elbow refuses to cooperate with your sleeve. Once you're dressed, you make your way slowly, carefully to the council chamber. Every step feels calculated, as if you are walking across thin ice and hoping your illness doesn't crack the surface beneath you. Knights nod respectfully as you pass. Servants bow low. No one mentions the slight wobble in your gait, or the way your hand occasionally trails along the wall for balance. They pretend not to notice. You pretend not to need it. It is an unspoken agreement that keeps your authority intact. Council meetings are grueling now. Sitting upright for hours is harder than any battle you've fought. Your back aches, your shoulders burn, your hands tremble when you rest them on the table, so you curl your fingers under your cloak to hide the shaking. You listen to nobles argue about border garrisons and tax burdens while your body quietly rebels beneath your robes. You fight fatigue with sheer stubbornness, blinking hard whenever your vision blurs around the edges. Let S bring in a modern comparison. Imagine trying to run a company board meeting while fighting a fever, multiple muscle cramps, and the sudden inability to feel half your toes. Now remove the possibility of calling in sick and add the knowledge that your absence might trigger a political meltdown. That's your Tuesday. Meals are another challenge. You sit with nobles and diplomats who talk animatedly while you try to grip your spoon without dropping it. You adjust your wrist angle. You focus. You hope no one is looking. You laugh at the right moments even when your fingers twitch and the spoon rattles against the bowl. And then there is paperwork. So much paperwork. Royal decrees don't sign themselves, but your hands now shake often enough that your signature sometimes looks like it was written during a minor earthquake. Scribes politely avert their eyes, pretending it is stylistic. By afternoon, your energy dips sharply. Your limbs feel heavy, as if someone filled your bones with wet sand. You retreat to your chamber under the guise of reflection, which is royal code for I need to sit down before my body stages a coup. Attendants bring warm cloths, salves, fresh bandages. You endure the cycle again, unwrap, inspect, clean, rewrap. You wince, you breathe, you carry on. Yet for all this, every limitation, every frustration, your mind remains sharp. Your will remains iron. You learn to read people more shrewdly, strategize more cleverly, conserve energy more wisely. You become a king not of physical strength, but of mental resilience. And strangely, this makes your advisors trust you more, not less. Because everyone can see it. The illness takes from you every day, piece by piece, and you fight back every day, piece by piece. That persistence, that quiet endurance becomes its own kind of power. As your body weakens, the nobles' ambitions strengthen. They whisper. They form factions. They cluster in hallways like medieval middle schoolers gossiping by their lockers, except instead of complaining about who stole whose lunch, they're debating which political maneuver will let them control chunks of the kingdom without technically committing treason. It's the kind of environment where every good morning my lord feels like it has hidden subtitles. Let's set the scene. The palace, once bustling with cheerful servants and the rhythmic clatter of purposeful work, now feels charged with a low, buzzing tension. You can sense it in the air, thick as incense, sharp as steel. The nobles bow deeply when you enter a room, but their eyes betray something else. Calculation, curiosity, a touch of impatience. They're not waiting for you to fail. They simply expect it. Chronic illness has a way of making people reassess their loyalties, and in your case, they reassess daily. Your council meetings become less about governance and more about navigating egos. Every noble speaks with an air of forced respect, the kind that says, "I'm polite because I must be," rather than, "I actually admire you." You listen as they debate the future of the kingdom with far more enthusiasm than they ever debated its present. Every plan they propose seems to contain a hidden clause, written in invisible ink. This will be great once you're no longer an obstacle. Raymond of Tripoli remains one of your few trusted pillars, calm, steady, loyal. But even he has rivals. Some nobles think he wields too much influence. Others whisper that he is preparing to take control entirely. Others, let's call them the instigators, enjoy watching both sides glare at each other across the council table like cats on the verge of hissing. Here's a modern comparison. Imagine being the CEO of a company while also being the only one who knows the Wi-Fi password, and meanwhile every department head is quietly interviewing for your job while still asking you for budget approvals. That's your life now. Your illness fuels the intrigue. Nobles notice the times you pause mid-sentence because your arm cramps. They notice when an attendant adjusts your cloak because your fingers can tea. They notice every tremble, every wince, and humans being humans, they start theorizing. "He's weaker this month," one whispers behind a tapestry. "I heard he can't ride anymore," another murmurs in the garden. "I saw him lose grip of his goblet," someone claims in a hallway, despite the fact it was the gobletier fault. It was slippery. Anyone could have dropped it. You maintain your composure, but internally you feel the weight of their watching. You're a king, yet you're forced to navigate your own palace like a performer hiding the strings holding him up. You perfect the art of controlled movement. You rest your hands strategically. You turn your head slowly enough that no one sees the strain, but quickly enough that it still looks natural. And while you're doing all this carefully choreographed survival, the factions grow bolder. Some nobles back your sister Sibylla, believing her future husband will be easy to manipulate. Others want your nephew crowned early, assuming a regency will give them the power they crave. Others simply back themselves, which is a bold strategy but not entirely unexpected in elite medieval politics. They exchange letters, form alliances, hold accidental private meetings in gardens and hallways and libraries. You begin to see the same faces grouped together in new and suspicious configurations. When they speak to you, their tone is warm, but their eyes measure how long they think you'll still be around, and yet you remain several steps ahead. Even as your body declines, your mind sharpens. You learn to read their motives with unsettling accuracy. You listen more carefully. You speak more strategically. You adjust your alliances not by force, but by cleverness. You become a master of subtlety, because subtlety is now your strongest weapon, and the nobles hate it. They expect a frail king. They get a calculating one. The whispers don't stop. The factions don't disappear. The tension doesn't ease, but you keep the kingdom together through sheer willpower, stubbornness, and a surprising amount of political finesse. Because they may see your body weakening, but they still underestimate your mind. You can't produce an heir, which makes the kingdom panic like a family arguing over who inherits Grandma-S teapot, but on a geopolitical scale, and not a cute little teapot either. No, this is the sort of priceless, ancient, irreplaceable teapot that if dropped could ignite an entire neighborhood feud. Your nobles hover like anxious relatives, each quietly convinced they should be the one to hold it next, while you sit in the middle of the emotional tornado wondering why everyone suddenly cares so much about your personal life. Let us set the scene. You're in the council chamber, attempting to focus on military reports, when a noble clears his throat dramatically, the kind of throat clearing that signals trouble. He asks, in a tone that is supposedly respectful, but definitely isn't he, whether you've considered the succession issue. You remind him that the kingdom has many pressing concerns. He nods politely, waits a beat, and then asks again, because apparently subtlety is dead. Your illness makes producing an heir impossible. Your physicians made that painfully clear in descriptions that were far too detailed for your comfort. The nobles know this. The nobles have known this. And yet they keep bringing it up as though maybe one morning you'll wake up cured and ready to populate the royal nursery like a medieval fertility fountain. Their true goal is transparent. If you can't have a son, someone else must supply the next generation, and that someone else must be a person they can influence, manipulate, or nudge into signing treaties they like. Enter your sister, Sibylla Intelligent, poised, and now the hottest political commodity in the kingdom. Her love life becomes a spectator sport for ambitious nobles who treat marriage proposals like they are placing bets at a horse race. You watch this unfold with increasing frustration and a hint of dark amusement. Marriage negotiations circle her like hawks circling prey. One noble suggests she marry a seasoned knight for stability, another prefers a foreign prince for alliances, another quietly proposes his nephew, whose main qualification seems to be nearby, and every suggestion is wrapped in enough affable flattery to hide the greed beneath. Sibylla herself is trapped in the awkward space between duty and personal agency, a place you know too well. She bows to pressure when required, resists when she can, and rolls her eyes with the precision of a woman who has endured too many political suitors with questionable hygiene. Raymond, your regent, tries to keep the chaos contained. He urges caution, diplomacy, strategic planning, but the tension is thick. Everyone knows that whoever controls the air controls the future of Jerusalem, and everyone wants a peace. Here is the modern comparison. Imagine you're too sick to run your family business, so everyone starts arguing over your sister estate in life, because whoever she marries will get to run the company next. It is messy, uncomfortable, and wildly inappropriate, but everyone insists it is just business. Meanwhile, prospective husbands parade through the palace like contestants on a reality show you never agreed to host. They try to look noble, gracious, dignified. Some succeed. Others clearly practiced in the mirror and still miss the mark. You watch them closely, evaluating not just their character, but the political factions behind them. A single marriage could decide the kingdom's fate long after you are gone, and you refuse to let your legacy be shaped by power-hungry opportunists. Your illness complicates everything. Nobles speak of your decline in softened, honeyed tones, as though they are discussing a delicate vase that might fall over if someone breathes too hard. You pretend not to hear. You keep attending council sessions. You keep ruling. You keep asserting that the kingdom will hold together. But the whispers persist. He's too weak. He won us last. We must prepare for the future. The truth stings. Not because you fear death, you've lived with that shadow long enough, but because you see how your condition emboldens those who have long coveted influence. Through all of this, you try to protect Sibylla not from marriage, but from being reduced to a bargaining chip. You talk with her quietly in gardens and corridors. You encourage her to choose wisely. You remind her that even in a world of political puppeteers, she has more strength than they realize. And in the end, that's the heart of your struggle. You're trying to secure your kingdom's future while knowing you're not part of that future. Your body limits you. Your illness tightens its grip. Your time grows shorter, but your mind remains sharp. Your will remains strong, and your determination to protect your sister, your kingdom, and your legacy burns brighter than any noble ambition. Your sister marries Guy of Lusignan, a man whose political competency is questionable, and not in the charming, "Oh, he is just new here, give him time" sort of way. No, Guy radiates the kind of unsettling energy you get when someone is promoted to management, despite having accidentally set the break room on fire twice. He is handsome, ambitious, and somehow both overconfident and deeply insecure, a combination that medieval kingdoms traditionally file under potential disaster. Let S set the stage. The palace hums with anxious whispers the moment the marriage is announced. Nobles exchange looks so loaded you could use them as trebuchet ammunition. Some are delighted, mostly the ones who think they can manipulate Guy like a chess piece with exceptionally fluffy hair. Others are horrified. Others simply sigh, as though they've just watched someone buy a very expensive horse without checking if it bites. You, meanwhile, sit in your chamber absorbing the news like a king who's been handed a lukewarm cup of disappointment. You care deeply for your sister, and you respect her right to choose, but Guy? Guy is a very specific kind of problem, the kind wrapped in silk, draped in ego, and occasionally swinging a sword in ways that make instructors nervous. Your first impression of him was memorable. He strides into your presence with the swagger of a man who thinks he is starring in his own heroic saga. He bows deeply, too deeply, dramatically enough to make eye contact with the floor tiles, and then rises with an expression that suggests he's expecting applause. You manage a polite nod, but internally you're thinking, "Oh, no, this is the man who might one day lead my army." He speaks to you with respect, but with an undertone of assumption, like he already sees himself as your successor, which is bold and presumptuous, and frankly, dangerous. His arrogance is subtle, but it's there, dangling off every sentence. When he tells you that he hopes to learn from your example, you can tell if he means it sincerely or if he's already planning to replace the example entirely. The real issue isn't Guy's personality, though that's also an issue. No, it is what Guy represents. His marriage to Sibylla forges an alliance with a faction of nobles who have been circling the political arena like vultures waiting for their moment. They believe they can mold Guy. They believe they can rule through him. They believe he will be eager to shift policies, armies, and loyalties in whatever direction benefits them most. And unfortunately, they might be right. Guy loves the idea of power the way toddlers love shiny objects, enthusiastically, clumsily, and without a clear sense of consequences. His leadership style seems to be an unpredictable blend of bravado, impulse, and a touch of theatre. When he talks military strategy, it is always about bold charges, glorious battles, decisive victories, never logistics, supply lines, or the minor detail of not getting half the army killed. Here is the modern comparison. It's like watching your competent sister date a man who wears sunglasses indoors, talks loudly about business ideas he has never researched, and insists he totally understands crypto. And then she marries him, and suddenly your entire inheritance depends on this guy not filing your family house as an NFT. As your illness progresses and your ability to command armies diminishes, the nobles begin floating the idea that Guy should take on more responsibilities. Small ones, they say, just a minor taste of leadership. You watch his eyes gleam at the suggestion, and your stomach drops. Raymond shoots you a look across the council table that says, "Absolutely not." The Templars shift uncomfortably. Half the nobles hold their breath. The other half smirk. You take a slow breath, steady yourself, and remind everyone firmly that you are still king. You still decide, and Guy is not ready. The room falls silent. Even Guy seems unsure how to respond. He bows, again dramatically, but his jaw tightens, and you know in that moment that political trouble is no longer approaching it. Est already arrived, wearing expensive boots and a smug expression. You love your sister. You want her happiness, and you understand that marriage is a political tool as much as a personal bond. But Guy? Guy is the wild card in a deck that's already fraying at the edges, and you know deep down that choices like this may shape the kingdom long after you are gone. Despite everything, you manage to outmaneuver Saladin again at Karak. It is like winning a chess match while half asleep and missing several fingers improbable, exhausting, and destined to make future historians blink twice. By the time Karak is under threat, your illness has progressed so far that getting from one end of a room to the other feels like trekking through wet sand. And yet here you are, preparing to ride out once more because your kingdom is in danger, and no one else seems capable of doing anything sensible about it. Let S set the mood. Word arrives that Saladin has laid siege to Karak, a massive, imposing fortress perched above deep valleys. It is wedding season in Karak, which means the place is already full of guests, banners, feasts, and probably a deeply regrettable amount of medieval wine. Nothing says romantic celebration like hearing that the most feared military commander in the region has surrounded your castle with armed men. When the messenger reaches Jerusalem, breathless and pale, you're in the middle of a council session. Your joints ache. Your hands tremble. You're trying to look regal while secretly wondering if your left foot has decided to stop communicating with the rest of your body. Then the news hits the room. Karak, under siege. Saladin, again. Instantly the council explodes into noise. Nobles argue. Templars swear. Raymond presses his lips together in a frustrated line, already calculating logistics. And Guy, your new brother-in-law, expresses a loud and unhelpful desire to charge into battle immediately, preferably mounted on a metaphorical narrative horse of heroism. You breathe deeply. You consider your options. And then, because you are King Baldwin IV, because you are stubborn, because you refuse to let Saladin dictate the terms, you make the same decision you always make. You will ride. Your attendants blanch as they prepare your armor. Your body is so fragile now that every movement feels like operating a machine whose gears grind against one another painfully. Your legs wobble. Your fingers can to grip buckles. Your arms feel like hollow reeds. But when you step outside to mount your horse, your soldiers see their king, not the illness. That matters. Perhaps more than anything, the march to Karak is slow and grueling. But your presence electrifies the army. If the king can push through his agony, then surely they can push through their fatigue. Knights speak in hushed awe. Commanders ride with renewed confidence. Even the horses seem to square their shoulders, if horses can do that. Meanwhile, Saladin is doing his thing, setting up siege engines, cutting off supply lines, confidently assuming that Jerusalem won't be able to respond fast enough. And honestly, he's justified in thinking that. You're sick. Your nobles are divided. Your new brother-in-law keeps offering advice that sounds like it was overheard in a tavern. Logically, Jerusalem should be slow to move. But you're already on the road. When word reaches Saladin that you're approaching with the army you personally, his entire strategy wobbles. No matter what he thinks of your illness, he knows one thing. You do not bluff. If you say you're a coming, even if it cost you your strength, your comfort, or your ability to stand upright afterward. And so, in an unexpected twist, Saladin decides that fighting you right now isn't worth the trouble. He withdraws from Karak before your forces even arrive. Just like that. No climactic clash. No dramatic final duel. He simply packs up, turns around, and leaves, as if someone reminded him he left the stove on at home. Your army celebrates. The people of Karak burst into relieved cheers. The wedding festivities resume, though, with significantly more caution this time, and you, exhausted beyond measure, allow yourself a faint smile. You didn't lift a sword, you didn't charge into battle, you didn't need to. Sometimes victory comes not from strength, but from the reputation you've built, one forged through courage, defiance, and sheer refusal to quit. Let's add a modern comparison. Imagine dragging yourself out of bed with the flu to attend a work meeting, only for the problematic co-worker causing all the chaos to resign the moment they see you walk through the door. That's Karak. After the withdrawal, you can barely stay upright. Your attendants rush to help you dismount. Every joint burns, every muscle screams. You feel hollowed out, drained, as if your body is fading the moment the battle tension leaves your veins. But inside, something glows. You did it. Again. One last brilliant move. One last victory carved from pain, resolve, and the iron will of a king who refuses to be defined by illness. Your eyesight dims. Your mobility decreases. You sense time slipping through your grasp like sand. Yet you keep ruling, stubborn to the end. It's a slow, quiet unraveling, your body shrinking inward, while the kingdom still demands outward strength. Every morning you wake up feeling farther away from the person who once charged at Montgisard. The world around you blurs, not just from failing vision, but from the strange drifting sensation of watching life continue at full speed while you move in slow, reluctant increments. Let's set the tone. Your chamber, once bright and familiar, becomes a landscape of shadows and silhouettes. Colours lose their sharpness. The faces of your attendants become soft shapes, recognizable more by voice than by sight. You strain to focus on documents, leaning close until the letters smear together. Scribes quietly rotate your desk lamp well, candle closer, pretending they're readjusting the light, when what they are really doing is helping you avoid the embarrassment of asking. Your hands fail you more often now. Writing feels like trying to thread a needle during an earthquake. The tremors travel through your fingers, through your wrists, through your very will. Signing decrees takes twice as long. You grip the quill tightly, your knuckles whitening, until Raymond gently places a hand on your shoulder and reminds you that you don't have to sign everything in one sitting. Mobility becomes its own battleground. Some mornings, your legs simply refuse to cooperate. You sit on the edge of your bed, staring at them like, "Come on, we've talked about this." Servants appear with arms ready to steady you. You accept their help with a nod, but the humiliation bubbles quietly inside. You were once a king who led armies on horseback. Now simply rising from a chair requires a personal support team. Let us bring in a modern comparison. Imagine trying to run a country while your body acts like a phone battery, stuck permanently at $3, draining faster every time you open an app. You're trying to function, trying to stay strong, but every task takes more energy than it should, and you have no charger. Still, you push through. Despite all this, the kingdom does not pause. Council sessions continue. Nobles still argue. Envoys still arrive from foreign courts with diplomatic messages, some friendly, some ominous, and you are still expected to rule. You sit at the council table wrapped in layers of robes to hide the tremors. You listen closely because listening is the one skill your illness has not taken. You speak slowly, deliberately, so no one notices the strain it takes to breathe steadily. The nobles, sensing your decline, grow bolder. Some test boundaries. Others propose temporary measures that sound suspiciously like power grabs. Guy of Lusignan hovers nearby, radiating a kind of restless ambition that makes your temples ache. Whispers multiply in corners and corridors. How long does the king have? Who should lead next? How do we preserve stability? Yet whenever they push too hard, whenever they circle too close, You remind them sometimes with nothing more than a raised voice or a sudden command that you are still king. Your body may be failing, but your authority is not dimmed, and that quiet, steel-edged determination keeps the kingdom from splintering. Your private moments are the hardest. Sitting alone in your chamber, you feel the illness gnawing relentlessly. Your hands twitch atop the blanket. Your feet feel distant. Your breath comes thinner. You run your fingers across a carved wooden box of childhood relics, barely feeling the grain. Memories slip in. Montgisard, council victories, rides through Jerusalem. You were young, fierce, radiant with conviction, and now you're dimming. Not disappearing, but dimming like a lamp running out of oil but still burning, refusing to snuff out before its time. Your attendants speak softly around you, aware of the fragility in your movements. Your sister visits often, her voice warm and steady. Raymond sits with you late into the evenings, discussing policy in hushed tones. Even the nights stand quieter when you pass by, their gazes heavy with the kind of respect that borders on mourning. Yet you keep ruling, you keep deciding. You keep fighting the slow unraveling with patience, intellect, and an iron will that refuses to yield. Because you know the truth. Your kingdom needs stability, even in your fading. Your people need reassurance, even when your own body offers none. Your legacy is not one of surrender, and so you hold on gripping power not out of ego, but out of duty, out of love, out of the fierce, unbreakable belief that a king's role is to serve until the final breath. With no heir of your own, you name your nephew another Baldwin, just to keep everyone confused your successor. He's even younger than you were. The nobles start stress-drinking wine, not sipping, drinking. The kind of full-bodied, full-goblet commitment that says, we are absolutely not emotionally prepared for another child king. Please refill this immediately. Let S set the atmosphere. Your chamber is dim, quiet, the air thick with incense meant to soothe you, though it mostly just makes you sneeze. Your advisors hover nearby, voices low, tension high. They know the time has come. You know the time has come. Your body is no longer following orders. Your strength feels borrowed, and the kingdom cannot afford uncertainty. So you make the decision. Your young nephew, Baldwin of Montferrat, will become your heir. A boy of 5 years. Old. When you were crowned at 14, half the nobles fainted into their cloaks from anxiety. Now you are handing them a monarch who still probably struggles with shoelaces. If medieval childproofing existed, they would be ordering it by the wagon load. You summon your council. The room fills with men who have spent the last few years performing Olympic-level political gymnastics behind your back. Now they sit upright, suddenly very aware that the breathtakingly fragile line between order and chaos rests in your hands. They expect controversy, arguments, power struggles, but you don't allow it. Your voice is thin but sharp. My nephew will rule. Raymond will serve as regent. The room freezes. Raymond carefully lowers the goblet he was about to sip from. Guy of Lusignan's eyebrows jump so high they nearly detach from his forehead. Several nobles exchange looks so dramatic they could qualify as stage performances. And then the whispers begin. A child king? Again. A regency? Again. A kingdom under external threat, internal division, and a leadership structure held together by hope, prayer, and strategic matchmaking. Absolutely yes, you've experienced it yourself, and you know better than anyone how fragile yet possible survival can be. Let us introduce a modern comparison. Imagine being the exhausted CEO of a large chaotic company and announcing your replacement is a kindergartner who just mastered colouring inside the lines. Everyone panics. HR panics. The board panics. The janitorial staff panics. But you're oddly calm, because you've lived the chaos, survived it, and shaped a kingdom in the process. You explain your choice clearly, methodically. You remind them that Baldwin IV carries royal blood from both sides. You emphasize the importance of continuity, stability, unity, and you choose Raymond, your most competent and level-headed advisor, to guide the child monarch, because you know Guy would happily turn the kingdom into a reality show titled Lusignan, The Reckoning. Your nobles nod solemnly, but the panic in their eyes is unmistakable. They can already imagine the political tug-of-war coming. Factions pulling at the regency, foreign powers sniffing weakness, opportunists circling like crows around a banquet table. But you also see something else, respect. Because even in your dying state, even with your eyesight dimming and your strength fading, you have just made a strategic, stabilizing decision that only you had the authority and foresight to make. Later, when the council disperses, the whispers spill through the palace like a slow-moving storm. Servants trade rumors, knights debate quietly in corridors, clerics pray. You lie back on your cushions, exhausted but resolute. You've handed the kingdom a path forward, not an easy one, not guaranteed, but the best one possible, with the pieces left on the board. Your nephew is brought to visit you small, curious, blinking up at you with wide eyes that do not yet understand the weight you have placed upon his shoulders. You speak to him gently, assuring him that he will be surrounded by good men, supported by the kingdom, guided by faith. You don't tell him the truth that kingship devours innocence, that the crown weighs more heavily on a child, that you wish desperately you could spare him. But you squeeze his hand. He squeezes back, and something in that small gesture warms your heart, even as your fingers struggle to feel it fully. This is your legacy. A kingdom battered but standing. A future uncertain but structured. And a child successor who, like you once were, will rise or fall on the strength of those around him. The nobles may drown their panic in wine, but you have done your duty. Even in decline, you shape the future with steady, deliberate resolve. Raymond is back in charge, and he acts like he never left. You wonder if the kingdom will hold together or collapse like poorly baked medieval bread, the kind that looks fine on the outside but instantly crumbles the moment you try to slice it for guests. And guess what? The kingdom is the bread. The guests are everyone in the Middle East. The baker is exhausted, and you are lying in bed hoping nobody notices the oven is on fire. Raymond steps into the regency with the energy of a man who has been waiting backstage with cue cards for years. He is competent, steady, and stubborn in the please don't argue with me, I have receipts sort of way. The moment he's reinstated, he starts rearranging council meetings, redistributing responsibilities, and quietly muttering corrections under his breath whenever Guy of Lusignan says something that indicates a severe misunderstanding of basic governance. The nobles react in predictable fashion. Half of them breathe sighs of relief. The other half look like children who've just been told Santa isn't real and taxes are due. Raymond is respected but not universally loved, mostly because he is that rare medieval noble who prefers functioning governments over personal chaos. In an age where most aristocrats treat political stability like a hobby they may or may not engage in depending on mood, Raymond insisting on order is basically radical. You watch this from your bedchamber, propped up by pillows, your mind still razor sharp even as your body betrays you. Each update comes through attendants, advisors, or Raymond himself, who visits often. He talks at length about diplomacy, troop movements, tax collections, and the delicate balancing act of keeping hot-headed nobles from throwing the kingdom into disarray. You listen, half comforted, half concerned, because here's the truth. While Raymond is capable, the factions haven't gone away. Gear supporters still lurk in corridors, exchanging glances like conspirators who've temporarily misplaced their conspiracy. Sibylla remains a political force, and her marriage means Guy isn't going anywhere, and the Templars and Hospitallers, those ever-feuding knightly orders, couldn't agree on what day it was if their lives depended on it. Raymond is stepping into a political minefield wearing the medieval equivalent of sandals. Let us introduce a modern comparison. Imagine leaving your company under the temporary leadership of someone competent but surrounded by co-workers who treat office politics like the Hunger Games. You come back to find they've formed little micro-kingdoms, alliances, secret Slack channels, and one guy has accidentally started a cult around the coffee machine. Raymond is dealing with that, except everyone has swords. He works tirelessly. He negotiates. He pacifies. He mediates disputes with the patience of a saint and the facial expressions of a man silently asking God for strength every 15 minutes. And despite the chaos, the kingdom doesn't fall apart. It wobbles, it wobbles, but it stays standing. You're grateful. Raymond is loyal to you, and he's determined to shepherd your nephew's fragile future. In the quiet moments after council briefings, he speaks to you not as a regent, but as a friend, honest, direct, often worried. He tells you plainly that the next years will be difficult, that external threats lurk, that internal fractures are widening, that your death, when it comes, will unleash ambitions he's barely keeping at bay. You nod. You already know. Still, there is comfort in Raymond's presence. He's always been a steadying influence, the kind of leader who prefers thoughtful planning over theatrics, something the kingdom desperately needs. With your strength fading, seeing him take control again feels like placing the kingdom into hands capable of holding it, even if only for a little while. But you're also aware of something else. Regencies can only last so long. Raymond is good, but he's not a king. The nobles know this. Guy knows this. And factions thrive when true power lies in the future, not the present. For now, though, Jerusalem breathes. Tense, uneven, fragile breath, but breath nonetheless. And as you rest, drifting further into decline, you cling to the hope that Raymond's steady leadership will hold long enough for your young successor to grow strong. Your world grows small. A bed, a window, a few loyal attendants. You can hear factions arguing in the distance, but you no longer have the strength to intervene. Once, the corridors of the palace buzzed with your footsteps, the clatter of armor, and the rush of advisors seeking your guidance. Now the world has shrunk into a soft cocoon, quiet voices, cool cloths, whispers of candle flame. Life outside your chamber moves on at full speed, but inside time feels slow, blurred, and heartbreakingly finite. Your window becomes your last connection to the kingdom you've fought for. You can see the sky over Jerusalem clear some days, hazy others, always beautiful. Sometimes the sounds of the city drift in. Merchants arguing, children laughing, distant horses clattering over stone. Those sounds comfort you. They remind you that the kingdom is still alive, that you've kept it alive, even as your own strength fades. The attendants who care for you now are quiet, gentle, skilled in the delicate art of preserving dignity. They help you sit up, adjust your blankets, and bring water to your lips with the reverence usually reserved for saints. When your eyesight dims too much to read, they read aloud psalms, letters, even old campaign reports when you are feeling nostalgic. Their voices blur into the background like soft music. Meanwhile, the arguing continues beyond your door. Nobles squabble in hallways. Factions clash in whispers. Some are already positioning themselves for the future. Others are genuinely terrified of what your death will mean. You hear fragments. Succession. Regency. Guy. Sibylla. Saladin. You're too tired to respond. Too tired to rise, too tired to tell them to stop behaving like children fighting over a toy chest. But deep inside, you know the truth. Your absence will ignite the political fires you bespent your entire reign trying to contain. Raymond visits often. He sits by your bedside, folding himself into the chair with the weary grace of a man who hasn't slept properly in weeks. He updates you softly, troop positions, diplomatic letters, the mood of the nobles, your nephew's condition. Sometimes he speaks frankly. Sometimes he speaks as though trying to protect you from stress. But you always listen closely, even when your head feels too heavy to lift. Sibylla visits too. She kneels beside the bed, takes your hand carefully. Your nerves are almost gone now, but the gesture warms you. She tries to talk about happy things, memories of childhood, stories you shared, the silly antics of palace animals. Sometimes she smiles, sometimes she cries. You squeeze her hand when you can. When you can tea, you whisper a reassurance instead. The days grow softer around the edges. You drift in and out of sleep at odd hours, your mind wandering through memories, the dust of Montgisard, the sunlight on the Temple Mount, childhood lessons, council debates, your father's face, the sharp smell of horses, Raymond's steady voice, Sibylla's laughter. Your victories flicker before you like lanterns in a darkening room. Your failures whisper at the edges too, but you've made peace with them. No king wins every battle, not even the healthy ones. Your body is shutting down, piece by piece. Your hands barely move. Your feet no longer feel the floor. Your breath shortens. Even turning your head feels like lifting a stone. But your mind, your fierce, determined, unbreakable mind stays luminous. There's one final conversation with Raymond. He leans close, his voice low. "The kingdom will endure," he tells you. "I will protect your nephew. I promise." You nod, because that promise is all you can ask for now. Your window glows with evening light. You feel warmth on your cheek. The world grows hushed, and as you listen to the distant hum of the kingdom you fought for still alive, still moving, you let your eyes close. You've led armies, faced Saladin, preserved a kingdom, defied an illness that should be confined you to obscurity. But you didn't fade quietly. You reigned, you endured, you protected, and now, finally, you rest. Everyone knows change is coming. The air feels heavy. Messengers rush around. The nobles pretend to be united, but the cracks show like bad pottery, the kind where you try to glue the handle back on, but it still wobbles ominously every time you pour water. The kingdom stands on a tightrope, and every single person, from palace servant to armored knight, feels the tension radiating like heat from stone. Let us step into the atmosphere. Jerusalem is quieter than usual, but is not the calm kind of quiet. It is the kind of quiet you get right before a thunderstorm, thick, charged, expectant. Market vendors keep glancing up at the palace. Pilgrims whisper near holy sites. Soldiers linger near gates instead of wandering off for wine. People sense that something monumental is shifting, even if they don't know exactly what it is. Inside the palace, the tension is louder. Messengers sprint down hallways, breathless, carrying orders, news, rumours, warnings, sometimes all three in the same bundle. Boots thud on stone, doors open and close with unnecessary force. Servants exchange worried looks while carrying trays of wine that spill just a little from shaky hands. And the nobles? Oh, the nobles are performing Olympic-level political acting. They gather in chambers and offer each other polite smiles so strained you could hear them cracking. They talk about unity, continuity, the good of the realm, but every sentence feels like it has a hidden clause written in invisible ink. As long as my faction comes out on top. There are 3 big camps forming, though everyone pretends otherwise. Camp 1, Team Raymond, who believe he's the only adult in the room capable of holding the regency together. They speak quietly, strategize logically, and drink moderately. Camp 2, Team Guy, who insist that obviously a king's brother-in-law has the divine right to step in. They speak loudly, strategize recklessly, and drink copiously. Camp 3. Team Let S Not All Die. A large group of exhausted nobles who desperately want stability, but also desperately want to avoid offending anyone with a sword or ambition. Sibylla moves through this web of tension, like a ghost of two worlds, part grieving sister, part political linchpin. Guy sticks close to her, trying to look regal, authoritative, and competent, though most days he manages only 2 out of the 3. He squares his shoulders, spreads his cloak dramatically, and speaks in decisive tones. Unfortunately, decisive tones do not always equal good decisions. Raymond, meanwhile, has the haunted expression of a man who realizes he's about to run a kingdom held together with string, prayer, and the hope that no one does anything disastrous. His days are a blur of negotiations, damage control, and quietly muttered frustrations like, "Why can't anyone just behave for 1 week? Let's add a modern comparison. Imagine working in an office where the beloved CEO is on leave, HR is panicking, the temporary replacement has questionable experience, and half the staff are secretly writing resumes. That assist Jerusalem now, except with more swords and fewer healthy coping mechanisms. The political tension seeps into every crevice of the city. Even the clergy sense it, lingering in doorways with worried brows. Knights sharpen their swords a little too aggressively. Tax collectors move faster, hoping to finish rounds before chaos erupts. The king's illness is no longer a secret. The entire kingdom is holding its breath. Inside the palace, you Baldwin hear it all from your bed. Voices drift through doors, muffled but full of urgency. Arguments, footsteps, pleas, plans. You're too weak to sit up for long, but your mind catches every tone shift, every tremor. You know exactly what is happening, even without seeing it. They're preparing, not for war, at least not yet, but for a political landscape that will change the moment you take your last breath. Everyone is waiting. Everyone is bracing. Everyone is afraid. The kingdom is like a candle burning low, still glowing, but vulnerable to the slightest breeze. And in the silence of your chamber, you feel that breeze coming. At just 23, your story ends. Quietly, painfully, and far too early. The kingdom mourns because they know no one will ever recreate your unlikely victories. They know that whatever political storms are coming, there will never again be a king who rode into battle half blind, half crippled, and fully determined to defend Jerusalem with a will strong enough to scare even Saladin. Your last moments are not dramatic. There is no blazing battlefield, no final charge, no heroic speech echoing down the halls. Instead, your end comes the way illness often does, slowly, steadily, like a candle guttering after burning too bravely for too long. You slip away in a soft chamber lit by dim light, with loyal attendants nearby, and the scent of incense heavy in the air. It is peaceful in the way that endings often pretend to be merciful. News spreads through the palace with the speed of a lightning strike. The corridors that were buzzing with tension only hours earlier fall silent. Servants freeze mid-tusk, their faces blanching. Guards straighten in shock. Scribes lower their quills. Even the nobles who were moments ago sharpening their factional daggers pause, interrupted by something deeper than ambition. Because for a moment the politics stop, the scheming stops, the whispering stops, and all that remains is grief. The people of Jerusalem hear the bells first slow, rolling tolls that echo across the walls, through the markets, down every narrow street. Merchants halt their shouting, children fall quiet, pilgrims bow their heads. The bells announce what everyone feared, what everyone sensed, what everyone hoped would somehow never arrive. The Leper King is gone, and the grief hits hard, harder than anyone expects. You weren't just a king, you were a symbol, a paradox, a miracle wrapped in tragedy. The boy who shouldn't have survived childhood, The teenager who shouldn't have led armies. The king who shouldn't have won battles, and yet you did all of it anyway, fueled by a mixture of stubbornness, duty, and an almost frightening refusal to give up. Your enemies respected you. Your allies depended on you. Your people believed in you. And now, the city feels the loss like an earthquake beneath its foundations. Raymond receives the news with a heavy stillness. He sits for a long moment beside your empty bed, looking at the space where you once struggled to sit upright and strategize as though the fate of the kingdom was to balance precariously on your weakening frame. He bows his head not as a regent, not as a noble, but as a man saying goodbye to a young friend who carried too much for too long. Sibylla weeps openly, unashamed, her grief echoing through the palace like a cracked bell. She grips the edge of your blankets as though holding on to you might reverse time. Guy stands beside her, awkward at first, then solemn. Even he seems to understand the magnitude of your loss, if only briefly. The knights of the temple and hospital gather in the courtyard, their white cloaks still and heavy. For once they don't argue. They simply bow their heads, because they've seen what you endured. They've watched you lead while your own flesh betrayed you. They know how rare your courage was, and the people whisper your name the way they whisper the names of saints. Baldwin, the Leper King, the warrior child, the one who held Jerusalem together with nothing but willpower and a body fighting against itself. Your funeral procession winds through the city cloaked in mourning. The crowd is vast. People press forward not to glimpse royalty, but to honor someone they genuinely admired, someone who fought for them, someone who never once used his suffering as an excuse to stop. Modern comparison? It's like losing a leader who showed up to work every day with a terminal illness and still outperformed every healthy executive in the building. You didn't just exceed expectations, you invented new ones. As Jerusalem mourns, a realization spreads like a cold wind. There will never be another king like you, not because of your victories, not because of your lineage, but because of your heart unrelenting, unbroken, unimaginable. Your story ends at 23. But your legacy? It echoes far beyond your final breath. Historians will later marvel at how a sick teenager held Jerusalem together for a decade against impossible odds. Your name becomes legend not because you lived long, but because you fought harder than anyone expected. You weren't supposed to be king. You weren't supposed to be a military commander. You weren't supposed to defeat Saladin not once, and certainly not twice. And yet your entire reign reads like a series of events where the universe said, "You can possibly do that." And you responded, "Watch me." Your legacy begins the moment your funeral bells stop ringing. People look around nervously, sensing the kingdom wobbling now that its quiet anchor is gone. But even as political chaos looms, your memory hardens into something unshakable. You aren't remembered as the dying king, you are remembered as the boy who rode into battle with bandaged hands and fading vision, refusing to let Jerusalem crumble. Let us step through the layers of your legacy. First, the immediate impact. Even your enemies respect you. Saladin himself reportedly admired your courage, acknowledging that you fought with a determination that far outstripped your physical limitations. Your victories, especially Montgisard, become the stuff of campfire retellings, whispered by soldiers who swear they saw something miraculous in the way you refused to fall. Second, the people's memory. Ordinary citizens remember you as the king who didn't hide behind palace walls, the king who showed up, the king who cared. They tell their children stories of the boy who rode with them, who suffered with them, who defended Jerusalem not from a throne but from the front lines. They talk about how you smiled, how you led, how you never let your illness keep you from being present. They speak your name with reverence the way modern people speak about leaders who embody resilience against all logic. Third, your political legacy. Yes, the kingdom will eventually fall into chaos. Yes, Hattin is on the horizon. Yes, the Crusader states will suffer without your stabilizing presence. but historians later look back and say it didn't fall on his watch. They see that you held it together through force of will, diplomacy, and sheer refusal to collapse. They note that without you, Jerusalem might have fallen years earlier. Your reign becomes a counterfactual if only he had lived longer, if only his illness hadn't progressed, if only your short life becomes a powerful study in what leadership looks like when stripped to its essence. You had no physical strength, no guarantee of longevity, no children to secure your line. What you did have was clarity about duty, about danger, about the stakes. You made decisions that were unpopular but necessary. You checked powerful men when they were wrong. You prioritized the kingdom over the egos of nobles who believed themselves indispensable. Fourth, the myth. Over time, you transform from a historical figure into something closer to a symbol. Chroniclers write about your illness with awe. They embellish, they dramatize, they imagine your pain as a kind of martyrdom. You become the Leper King, the monarch who fought not only enemies outside his walls, but the enemy within his own flesh. Children in later centuries hear your name and picture a warrior wrapped in bandages, luminous with bravery, riding into danger without hesitation. They don't always know the specifics of Jacobus Ford or Karak, but they know you. They know the story. The boy who should have died and didn't. The king who should have failed and wouldn't. The warrior who shouldn't have won and did. Finally, the lasting lesson. Historians, scholars, and storyteller across generations recognize something profound in your life. Greatness is not measured in years, strength, or perfect health. It is measured in will, in the choices made under pressure, in the courage shown when every part of you wants to surrender. Your reign proves that vulnerability doesn't negate leadership, it can define it. And so your name endures. Baldwin IV, the Leper King, the warrior of Montgisard, the boy who faced Saladin in fear and frailty, and never let any of them win easily. You don't become a legend because you lived long. You become a legend because you lived fiercely. And so, tonight, as you settle deeper into your pillows and let your breathing slow, you can let the story of Baldwin IV drift into the soft haze of sleep, a story equal parts heartbreaking, awe-inspiring, and absolutely unbelievable. You've walked through his battles, his council chambers, his darkest moments and his brightest triumphs. You've seen a teenager carry a kingdom on shoulders that were failing him, and somehow still charge into the desert sun with more courage than armies twice his size. It's strange, isn't it? How someone so young, so sick, and so constantly underestimated could hold together an entire realm, while many perfectly healthy adults today can't hold together a group chat. Baldwin didn't get to choose his circumstances, he didn't get to choose his illness, or the crushing expectations, or the relentless political circus circling his throne, but he chose how he met them, head on, with grit, humour, stubbornness, and the quiet kind of strength that doesn't brag, but simply endures. As you lie here, wrapped in clean sheets, enjoying heating, cooling, plumbing, and a total lack of medieval leprosy, maybe take a moment to appreciate how cushy modern life really is. You're not riding into battle half blind. You're not negotiating with nobles who treat power like a contact sport. You're not trying to save a kingdom while your own body collapses like a medieval folding chair. You have warm blankets, functioning medicine, a bed that doesn't creak like it's plotting your demise, and the luxury of resting without having to defend Jerusalem before breakfast. So breathe in, breathe out. Let Baldwin and resilience settle gently in your mind, not heavy, not stressful. Just a soft reminder that humans have always found ways to keep going, even when everything seems impossible. History may be messy, gross, and occasionally absurd, but it's also proof that people are stubborn, hopeful, and surprisingly heroic. Sleep well, friend. You've earned it.